Good morning, West Coast, and good afternoon, East Coast. This is Nancy Brown, delivering live from the AGC conference in Atlanta, Georgia. With me today is Samira Tilley. Samira is on the line, and she'll be answering questions via the chat and the questions window. So feel free throughout our presentation to interact with us in that way and ask your questions. We'll tackle those questions at the end of the presentation. Also with me today is special guest Aaron Wright from Hoar Construction. I'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself in just a minute. I just wanted to talk really quickly about our format today. First of all, we'll be delivering a few slides of introduction, talking about a little bit about Assemble and describe the case study for Hoar. And then we'll go into a live demonstration and kind of show you a few of the workflows that we mentioned in the presentation. We'll try and do that in about 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll follow up with Q&A so we get you back to work. So thanks to everybody for joining us in your busy afternoons and busy mornings. We're glad you could join us today. So Aaron, would you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Hoar Construction? Why don't you give our listeners a little bit of an idea about your markets, where you're located, and what your role is at Hoar, please.
Sure thing. Well, thank you for having me, Nancy. My name is Aaron Wright, and I am with one of the best general contractors and program managers in the nation. We just celebrated our 75th anniversary as a company, and we are a growing company. We have a lot of energy and excitement around technology. Slide here that you see shows a lot of project diversity that we explore as a company. We've got offices, over 10 offices scattered around Texas and the Southeast, and even an office in DC. And we're also a top program manager who represent owners, and so very diverse backlog and experience as a company.
Hey, Aaron, what's your role? What's your role at Hoar?
Oh, yeah. I am the Director of Integrated Construction, so you call me whatever you want. Been called a lot, so.
Yeah, especially when you're in those BIM roles, I'm sure.
That's right.
Great. Great. Anything else you'd like to tell us about Hoar before we get started?
No, that's it.
Okay,
you can read
great.
more about us on our website at hoar.com. Just make sure you go to the right one.
Awesome. I also want to note before we get started that we've cut and pasted a link to our Assemble website that allows you to download the case study about the project that we'll talk about today. So there are other additional materials that you can take a look at if we happen to miss something in the webinar today. So what we're going to review is the Brock School of Business located at Stanford University. This was a great project, and we asked Aaron to join us today because he and the project team made a commitment to BIM and a commitment to model-based estimating. And they didn't use just Assemble to do the work that they did on this project. Of course, they used Revit, they used Vico, they used Assemble, they used Smart Reality. They utilized a number of technologies that helped make this project successful. Now, of course, today we'll focus on some of the workflows that they used in Assemble and demonstrate those, but I wanted to give Aaron the opportunity to discuss at a higher level the overall approach to the way that they tackled this project, because it led to a lot of success even with the challenges that were thrown at them. So a little bit about Assemble. For those of you that aren't familiar with us, we extract information from a model from the authoring tool using a lightweight add-in, and we deliver that information to a web browser so that anyone on the project team can have access to that model information. And what we're trying to do is help companies leverage the model and its quantity information and its visualization information. We're trying to help people leverage that through design management, pre-construction, and well into construction processes. We allow for people that wouldn't typically get into BIM to get into BIM and use it to analyze and make decisions about their projects. You'll see more about what we do when we get into the demonstration portion. Now, some of the industry challenges that we see with BIM, and particularly in pre-construction, and some of the stuff that Aaron is going to talk about today, is that BIM and BDC resources are really limited in most organizations. I think that probably everybody on the call is familiar with the limitations that BIM and BDC resources have at organizations because of the fact that BIM and BDC resources are service organizations. They work across all phases of the company, all stages, and deliver information to the rest of the company. And this creates almost like a bottleneck in being able to leverage the value of BIM into many of the projects, and also limits the realization of BIM on many projects. In combination with that, there's a lot of lack of knowledge of how to use BIM in pre-construction and estimation, which creates another set of challenges. And also, contractual structures often don't reinforce collaboration between design and pre-con teams. So a number of these BIM challenges could be inhibiting to trying to execute a number of new BIM-related activities on a project. And so, once again, this was really exciting for us to be able to present, because back when Aaron started this job, he didn't let, and the project team did not let these kind of constraints get in the way with setting forth a vision of using the model to create better efficiencies on their projects. So the chart that you see on the left, I think this is a really interesting chart. It comes from Penn State University, and if you type in Penn State BIM uses, you'll find this chart. But what it outlines is the different BIM uses throughout a project lifecycle and the perceived benefit of those uses. And you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen that things like 3D coordination, design review, design authoring, construction system design, those are all really frequent uses that we see repeatedly right now in pre-construction and construction. And people also realize a benefit. But there's there's a whole group of other opportunities that realize a great amount of benefit if BIM activities were actually utilized in the pre-construction and construction processes. And so that's where we see our customers making this shift into the services that are operating in this space, in this zone of opportunity and benefit for their customers. So with Assemble, they're able to integrate some of these processes in an easier way due to the accessibility of the product. So the opportunities then are that because owners are demanding more BIM services, there's never been a better time to offer a number of the services, BIM services in pre-construction, and leverage that to win work. Accessing BIM tools has never been easy, and then with tools like Assemble, which is why we're here today, we can actually help you deliver results for your projects. So I'm going to turn this over to Aaron, and Aaron is going to continue with the case study regarding Stanford University. So Aaron, take it away.
Thanks again, Nancy. Well, the story I'm about to tell you is a somewhat of a little step back in time. The project that we really began with Hoar in the summer of 2013, and like Nancy said, we promised we would deliver BIM to the owner. It was one of their first experiences with a new method of delivery, and so this is the story of that. But a little bit about Stanford. Stanford is one of the oldest private universities in the state of Alabama, and this was a project that we really was a game changer for us as a company because it's right in our backyard. Literally, I probably couldn't hit a golf ball there, but it's close enough where some of you guys probably could. But again, it was a launch pad for our company, and at the time that this was going on was a real tipping point for us. And this project was pursued by a BDC approach, a fully integrated, model-based. It wasn't a IPD project. It was a more traditional design bid build. But traditionally with Stanford, the projects that they approached were typically hard bid, and this was an opportunity for that needed to bring on a contractor early, and that's what happened. So we began working for about 6 months with in this model-based approach. Davis Architects is one of a great partners here locally in Birmingham, and it was their first time sort of collaborating in a model-based approach as well. And so we set up the project with sort of Assemble as the first tool that we would use. The project was designed in Revit, of course. But at the time, what was happening is we had invested a lot of time and training and energy into teaching our estimators how to use Revit and some heavy lifting tools that really were not something that they would use every day in their workflow. And along comes Assemble, and that really served, like Nancy said, as I think she meant to say that access has never been easier, but some would say it's still not easy enough. But the along comes Assemble, and we're able to sort of spread the use of models to larger audience, and that process began to help us explore and dive deeper into new ways that we were using the model in pre-construction. And so one of the challenges that came along is, so this is an example of the original building design. It was a little over 100,000 square feet initially with 5 floors, and we had structured our cost in a uniformat-based, assembly-based cost structure. And what this allowed us to do is, with the model linked with cost, it allowed us to dissect the building and analyze cost by location. And that proved extremely valuable once we were met with some challenges. And so the story is around things were going nicely, and around Thanksgiving weekend of the fall of 2013, we were met against a deadline that said, listen guys, this project has to be $25 million or there's a chance the project's going to go away. And so over the course of 5 days, by having our cost structured this way in a uniformat location-based and model-based assembly, we could see where we could fluctuate and where we could cut we managed to cut about 16% overall of reduction in the building cost by removing a floor of the building. We had to shift the building actually on site to make things work. But this whole process occurred within about 5 days over the weekend, and the following Monday we confirmed that yes, we can deliver this project for $25 million, and we never looked back after that. Here's an example of the final design you see with 4 floors. And so construction started in January of 2014, and we continued to use the model use Assemble, and use the model throughout for design changes and updates, RFIs that arose out of construction. And then the project was finally turned over in August of 2015.
It's a pretty tight timeline.
Yeah. All of those cost savings were realized through the use of both VICO and through Assemble as our model-based approach. Another just exciting tool that we were able to use for student engagement, and it served as sort of a PR campaign, was, some of you may be familiar with the guys at Knowledge and Smart Reality. We created several of these posters that we placed around campus. Smart Reality is an augmented and virtual reality app that renders a model on your phone or mobile device. And so we planted these posters all around campus and allowed the students to engage and interact with the model with their iPhones or with their mobile devices. and you see the reaction on their faces that they were really blown away that this was going to be their new building. So this was just an exciting way that we were able to engage them in the process and of construction and in new ways using technology.
And if you don't know Aaron, he's the guy on the left with the sunglasses on his head.
And here's, again, just another picture of smart reality. And I'd highly recommend to check out what these guys are doing. And they're a great technology company as well.
All right, so thanks, Aaron, for running us through that and some of the things that really worked out for you guys. What I'd like to do now is walk you through the model and show all of you on the call a little bit about Assemble. In doing so, we'll take a look at a couple of different use cases that were used throughout the project. Some of the things that Aaron talked about, and I'm just going to go through this as kind of a checklist to make sure that we covered all the topics. Number one, visualizing budget decisions. So as most of you know, when you're going through the value engineering process and you're trying to reduce the scope of a project, communicating that scope in a way that everyone can understand what the changes are and the implication of the changes is often difficult. And with Assemble, he was able to utilize, and I don't want to speak over the top of you, Aaron, you feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but he was able to utilize Assemble to be able to communicate visually the impact of those changes and then, of course, the cost related to those changes. The rapid quantity extraction allows for continually being able to monitor the budget and monitor the cost of the project. Accurate change management when it came time to make those decisions on cutting out the floor. They were able to make comparisons between the quantities of the concrete in the existing model and the quantities of the concrete in the new model to ensure that their numbers were accurate. Of course, being able to demonstrate and display this information to the owner so that they could see the impact of the quantity changes and then to understand the impact on the design was invaluable. And all of that led to the rapid decision making so that they were able to turn around a situation that could have turned out to be extremely challenging if the project didn't move forward. They were able to make sure that the project was going to move forward in a timely and on-budget manner. So all those were really positive outcomes of the experience or of the project. So with that, I'll go ahead and switch over to Assemble. Now, for those of you that may not be familiar with Assemble, there are a couple of major components here that you're seeing. One is the model viewer. The model viewer is our own technology and delivers a lot of model information into just a web browser. So you'll notice I'm using Google Chrome. And in addition, each of the components that you see in the model are linked inextricably to the inventory up above, where you'll find all of the items that are in the view down below in the model viewer. So any of the objects that I choose from a line item, let's say, are available to be viewed in the model viewer very easily and very straightforward. And of course, you see the quantity associated with the columns in this situation here. So because this model information is delivered in a quick and easy accessible way to a web browser, it doesn't prohibit people from taking the time to check out and look at the next version or the new version of the model. It provides people with easy access to get in there and start to dig around the information. Now you can tell by this model that it has, it's a pretty high quality model. There's a lot of information in this model that Hoar used to be able to do the budgeting. As we all know, the models do not cover every single aspect of every line item in your estimate. Aaron, what would you say in terms of the amount of coverage the model provided you for the estimate in percentage? What portion of the estimate was the model used for?
Yeah, I would say that while this model was very detailed in terms of the quantities that were modeled and the objects that were modeled, we typically are able to get around 65 to 75 plus or minus 60 to 70% of our quantities come straight from the model these days. And just as a company, how we're using Assemble is that it is nearly 80% of our projects overall are now integrated into Assembles. So what I'm saying is, any given project, if we have a model, it goes to Assemble.
So every time you get a model, you're pushing it to Assemble, which one of the things that you'll notice on the left-hand side in what we call the model tree is that there are quite a number of versions of this model that have been posted to, of any of these models that have been posted to the project. And so along the way, they were able to understand very quickly what has changed from one model version to the next. So I'm going to go ahead and do something here too. Before I go ahead and change to, I'll go ahead and move to a different view. We'll take a look at the level 1 view. This is a view of the structural concrete, and as Aaron had mentioned, this was one of the parts of the building that was important in understanding how the concrete changed to impact, they got rid of a level, and so the concrete was going to change. It was a high-risk area. And so if we look at a comparison between the model versions at the time of that change, we can very easily see how the quantities impacted, how the design solution impacted the quantities. So I'll go ahead and pull up one of the older versions, and I'll go ahead and run it against the previous version. I may not have gone far enough. Oh, there we go. And you can see just exactly how the new design impacted the concrete. Notice the large reductions in the inventory. So just that quickly, because they were investing in the model and tracking the information in the model between model versions, that quickly they could see the impact of the changes that had been made to the concrete. And you'll see the additions and the deductions in the line items, and then also those items can be identified by selecting them and seeing where they are in the model. So reds were all the components that were deducted, green were all the components that were added, and of course communicating to the owner, they can very clearly see how the site shifted and the changes between the two versions. Now in addition, Aaron mentioned that they managed a lot of the estimate in VICO. And one of the aspects about Assemble is that we do help and facilitate data management and data exchange. And so especially when the model is changing from model version to model version. So if you invest in adding this location-based coding and et cetera to your estimate, when you get a new model in the door and you have to QA and QC all those codes, Assemble is the solution that Hoar went to be able to maintain and update and QA those codes. So I'm going to go ahead and exit the compare feature here, and we'll take a look at the model by the codes that were added. So let me go ahead and switch to the very first version of the structural model, and we'll take a look at the information at that point. Now you'll notice that my inventory is displaying the information by simply the category name. So all of this information was populated in the model, and I can redisplay, I can change the hierarchy of the information based on any parameter that's in the model. So they added a parameter to the Revit model, published it to Assemble, and then populated that information. And you can see that there are the VICO codes here. So all I've done is taken the database and pivoted it based on the VICO codes. So there are all the VICO codes and the components that were not assigned, maybe for a reason, at the very start of the project. And then, of course, if we go ahead and take a look at the project and the last publications, we can see again that the VICO codes are all populated for all that work. Now, the process for being able to condition this information is, number one, it's very easy to QA and QC. You can just click on the items and verify that those objects are indeed as they're listed. Number two, this information can be exported and can exported to Excel and can be conditioned in Excel. So the names can be changed, the codes can be changed, saved, and then imported back into the Assemble database, where then it can be round-tripped all the way back to the model. So in combination with Assemble for change, Assemble for managing the data conditioning, and Assemble for ease of use, Assemble was playing multiple roles as Aaron was working through this project. For instance, I'll go back to the second model, and I'll show you how easy it is to identify where there's gaps in the VICO codes. So Model 2 is published, happened to be a model that looks like they didn't go in and make updates to the VICO codes, and you could see very easily and very quickly where those new components were that needed to be coded. So it's a very straightforward, easy to access the data way of conditioning these models as you're continuing to do your model-based estimating. So Aaron, did you want to add anything to those workflows that I highlighted real quickly?
No, you're exactly right. At the time we probably were learning a lot on this one as far as the way we were pushing our VICO codes in and out and that kind of thing. I'd like to say that the latest and I guess the newest way to do this with Assemble properties is probably a better workflow if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So Aaron had to go through the process of adding, as I mentioned, adding a parameter to Revit, publishing it to Assemble, adding the VICO codes in either Assemble or Excel, and then syncing them back to the new model version and then publishing again. With Assemble properties, it's now possible for you to add, if you had a VICO code, you could simply add your VICO property to the Assemble properties, add that value here in Assemble properties, and what happens is we'll carry that value forward for you as long as that instance ID exists. So it takes a few steps out of the process because you're not having to sync that information back to the Revit model, and you're not having to add that VICO parameter to the Revit model if you can't do that with the design team. So it allows you to maintain a database of values outside of the architect and the engineer's model. And so what Aaron was referring to is in our capability now, he could have managed all this information outside of the design model, and it would have been even more easy and straightforward to do that. Did I capture that correctly?
That's right.
Okay. So with that, we've covered about a half an hour. I want to make sure that we get to some questions for you, Aaron. Samira, would you like to join us on the line and let us know if you have any questions for us at this point?
Absolutely. We have quite a few questions coming in. And just to start off, I did have a few people ask whether we will have this recording available. We will have this recording sent out to everyone tomorrow. So some of the questions that have been coming in. Aaron spoke about eliminating a floor to cut cost. Outside of eliminating scope, how was Assemble used for value engineering?
Well, I understand that cutting the floor out of a building doesn't exactly mean value engineering that you want. However, Nancy, if you can orbit the model around the backside of the building.
Can we show that variance between the two model versions?
Yeah.
Between the two. I'll just go back to that because I think that displays the concrete issue.
I guess this is a small example of value engineering in Assemble that I can easily show. But on the back side of the building where these
sorry.
Yeah, just show the just one model right now.
Oh, just one model? Okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
So where the two little bump outs are, and there's what that is, where it looks like a pipe organ. There, yeah.
Yeah.
One small way that we used assemble is in those four areas. Again, we're not saying that again, that you have to know that this was not an integrated project delivery method. It was just a teaming approach where we were allowed to work with the design team to review their model and QC it, offer suggestions of how to get things implemented or modeled better. Some were taken, some were not. The way this foundation structure was modeled in this area was probably not the best way or the most accurate way that we would construct it. And so the way that the footings, I guess they're transparent right now, but the way that these were modeled is each step down footing was its own slab foundation. So we were studying this with our team, and we said, this is not accurate. This is not how we would actually build it in the real world. And so we were able to take those quantities and come up with a better construction method, and ultimately eliminated, I believe it was, maybe 20 yards of concrete, which, it isn't that much, but it was just that is one example that we didn't share, I didn't speak of earlier, where we used the model to sort of understand that better as a team.
Great. Another question for you, Aaron. Since so much of the model data is dependent on the way that the design team models in Revit, can you speak to how you interacted with the architects to optimize the information you were able to pull from Assemble?
Okay, we to use a term from it wasn't rocket appliance. We just asked for it, and we're lucky to have a great design team that we work with a lot. That it was one of the first times that they actually got the feedback that they were looking for, and so the fear of sharing really went away, and they understood our intentions, that we're not out to catch them, we're out to see if there's a better way. So I don't know how you create that magic on every project, but this one had it. And practically what we did is we held weekly design review meetings. So they would post model updates weekly. We would push those to Assemble weekly and see what the variances were, track the changes, update our budget, update our estimate, save a version in VCO, and track those changes as well in cost. And so any feedback that we would suggest would come on one of those bi-weekly design review meetings.
Perfect. Our next question is for you, Nancy. How is the cost database established? Does Assemble have an option to provide a cost database starter kit that they can modify, or do they have to build one from scratch?
No, at this point, you do need to have your own cost database, your historical cost database or a cost database that you build from another source. Once you have that into an Excel spreadsheet, you're able to add it on a project level. So we actually have the capability to upload a cost database. I'll go ahead and edit this project. You can upload your own cost database and then add your unit of measure and your quantity in Excel. So this is just exported to Excel. So I'll export into the Excel format. And it provides you with a template that you can use to fill in your cost information, your unit information, unit cost information, and the coding scheme you want to use. So you don't have to use Uniformat. You can use CSI and your own descriptions and your own levels. So we go down to level 5. We'd go down 5 levels. So you can just cut and paste your own coding scheme into work breakdown structure into this format, and then simply import it into the project. And then as you go in and condition the items in Assemble, you use the assembly code parameter to make those modifications. So if I go back to the model, and of course, in Aaron's project, he was using VICO code to manage the estimate information. So he wasn't using this workflow, but I'll just show you the location for this.
Yeah, I would say that I would encourage more use of Assemble for cost. One challenge, though, that we have to come up with and work with you guys on is how do we capture the cost and the quantities that aren't modeled in Assemble if we were using it for cost.
That's right.
But theoretically, with what you're showing here, you should be able to carry some, this is for maybe high budget, conceptual estimating, but carry some unit cost and associate that with the model.
Yeah, I would say that the customers do this functionality, use it for more budgeting, particularly during the design process. And at certain milestones, they'll do a full estimate, but they'll use this for trending the quantities and budgeting. Yeah, so once that's been uploaded to your project, you can just choose how you'd like to code that item, and it will be added to the database. And then you can simply group your information by assembly code, and it will display that information by assembly code. And as I mentioned, it can be in CSI format or in uniformat. This happened to have some uniformat information in it. So you can customize your cost database.
Great. We did have a couple of questions come in regards to VICO. How long will it take to prepare the model issued by the design team with the VICO code internally? And could you give an overall idea of the necessary steps?
I'm guessing that's like, how long did it take you to break up the slabs and so that you can assign things in the way that you wanted to? Did you guys do a lot of model modifications?
We did not actually. We weren't on this particular project. There was another question, I think, about do we have a problem with the quality of design models versus building our own? And the answer to that question is yes. We typically on more than half the time we use designers' models for quantity checks, and when we can, we link those to cost in our estimates. Occasionally, we modify design models to use for detailed construction purposes. Maybe we add rebar, maybe we create a detailed wall mock-up in 3D from the Revit model. Maybe we modify the slab or foundation to the actual construction like I mentioned earlier. So the answer is the time depends on what you're trying to get out of modeling. We elected as a team that this would be one project that we're going to invest a little bit of extra time in to see what value we would get, and we achieved that goal. So
perfect. Now a couple of questions in regards to the estimate. We have a few people who want to know, was the estimate completely built in Assemble, or was Assemble only used for understanding quantity changes?
At the phase of this project, Assemble was only used for quantities and changes. I'm sorry. That doesn't limit the use of it at all. That was a huge portion of what we did. As I mentioned earlier, Assemble allowed our estimators to learn and jump in and really adopt BIM as part of their workflow. So I think that's one of the greatest benefits of Assemble. But the estimate was done in VICO, Trimble's VICO office.
Now, did you guys have contract documents to assist in clarifying collaboration with the architect and owner?
No, but we should have. This was one of the first quote with big quotes BIM projects for the owner too, and so they saw the value of it. And it's important to note, I think, that their traditional method of prior to this project was the hard bid lump sum approach. This project was sort of a game changer for them as an organization, because since this project was completed, Hoar's been able to stay on campus for several other buildings on their campus. So they've seen the value of what we do as a company, and that's been one of the biggest wins of all.
Repeat work's always the best win.
Yeah. But
Now, does the cost database have to be loaded into each assembled project?
Yes. So each project can have a unique cost database.
All right. Is there any interoperability between Assemble and Tekla structural model?
Currently, we don't have a publisher for Tekla, so the workaround that our customers are using is to export an IFC file from Tekla, open that in Revit, and then publish through Revit. Now, we understand that that is a workaround. We're actually doing some research right now to figure out how we can get some other publishers into our Assemble environment now that we have Federation. So stay tuned for more detail on that, but that's our current workaround for Tekla. Not ideal, but that's what it is right now.
Great. Now, a question for Aaron. How reliable were the MEP models for takeoffs and estimating?
what we did on the project is our subcontractors were using Revit to prepare their coordination models and their shop drawings and fabrication, which was one of the first, for me personally and for us, is the first time that was actually going on. So it was very accurate in terms of what our subcontractors were doing with Revit and the quantities that they were able to use.
Right. Our next question, how do you extract formworks from the concrete model?
You get a general idea of the square footage of the wall and use the square footage of the wall with a custom formula in Vico to calculate your desired formwork for budgeting.
Thank you. One of the questions that came in, why didn't you use Vico to extract quantities? What does Assemble offer in terms of quantity extraction?
Vico is a great tool for very detailed and self-perform quantities. So that was what if we're self-performing a concrete project, we might typically use Vico for that. So this project we elected to go with Assemble. One of the main reasons there was because we were getting so many updates, weekly updates from the architect with model changes, and that's a challenge in Vico with the publishing process. And so with sync feature in Assemble, it allows you to publish and push those Vico tags back and forth to the Revit model.
Great, thank you. I think in respect to everyone's time, these are all the questions that we can address in today's session. However, as Nancy mentioned, we will reach out to you and make sure that any outstanding questions that we get to as soon as possible. Anything else, Aaron and Nancy, that you guys would like to add?
No, just appreciate everybody's time. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, and we'll look forward to following up with you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We will make sure that we get the recording over to you guys before the end of day tomorrow. Take care.
And thanks to Aaron. Yeah, thank you, Aaron, for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I was glad to be here, and just thanks to everybody who worked on this project for Hoar. It was an outstanding project for us, and we thank you guys at Assemble too. So.
All right. Thank you. We hope that you join us again for another Assemble webinar. Take care.